Alright, so the goal of this video is just going to be to get you set up with Golang, depending on your operating system, and then get you set up with some kind of IDE, or just point you to where I'm going to be, like the IDE that I'm going to be using for this Golang series, and then write a Go program, and then talk a little bit about some of the basic requirements for a Go program. I have follow-up videos to discuss a lot of the stuff way more in depth. So first thing I'll say is to run Go programs, you need to go to the Golang website and actually install Go. Um, I'm on a Mac, so if I was doing this for the first time, I'd download this, get the DMG, go through the wizard, and eventually verify that I have the correct version that I meant to install. So in this case, 1.16.5, right? On Windows, I don't have a lot of insight into what this would look like. Hopefully it's not too much of a burden. Hopefully there's not a bunch of stuff that you need to do differently, but the idea is the same. I will say that I remember having a Windows machine, and if there's an option to change your path or have the wizard change your path, I think you should please do it. It will make your life easier. That's my experience. It made my life easier when running programs. I'm particularly thinking around Python. I remember when I installed Python on my Windows machine, I made the mistake of not updating the path, and that became a pain. In this case, I think you should, if you can, update your path so that way you have Go everywhere whenever you open up PowerShell or the command prompt. On a Linux machine, it looks like you get a tarball. You have to update your path manually. So hopefully that's not too much of a burden. Again, if you're a Linux user, I assume that you're probably used to doing this kind of stuff anyway, so no big. When you're done doing that, you want to go to a terminal and hit Go version. Make sure it's the version that you wanted. If you're good there, then great. So for these videos, for the series, I'm going to be using VS Code. You don't need to use VS Code. You don't even need to use an IDE. And now it's opinion time. I think that if you are going to be writing programs that are not trivial, not trivial, that's not a good word, if you're going to be writing substantial programs that have a lot going on, and then there's a lot of rich functionality in your program and whatever it is that you're building, then use an IDE. It will just make your life easier. With VS Code and other IDEs like IntelliJ or you know what, JetBrains also offers a Go IDE. It's called Goland. To get this, you will have to splurge just a little bit. I don't think it's a huge I don't have this. I'm not being sponsored by JetBrains at all, but I do use IntelliJ a lot for work. And the features in IntelliJ are pretty cool. I assume that they have very similar ones for Golang that are specific to the language. So I don't have a strong reason to have this IDE. If at some point I'm you know what, it would really boost my productivity to have the features that are here, then great. For now, VS Code is going to get me through that. If you want to use Atom, Vim, Emacs, whatever it is that you want to use, you're using Nano, you can totally do that. I just think you may get slowed down, especially if you're not familiar with the standard, what is the standard library in Go and all the basic packages. So up to you. If you do choose to do this, I'd say download VS Code. The next step I'm going to show is kind of setting up VS Code or configuring it for Golang development. So assuming that you have successfully installed Golang and then you installed VS Code, just navigate over to VS Code, open up a new window. I would say when you do that, actually I will open it up as if it's new, so I'll just do a new window here. Might take a second. This computer's a little bit older. If I'm being completely honest, this computer's from 2012, so it's pretty old. This is my old reliable desktop that I used in high school. It's been a while. Anyways, you'll probably be greeted with something like a welcome pane right here that says, "Hey, welcome. Look at all the things that VS Code can do." You can safely exit it, or if you want to take a tour of VS Code, feel free. I'm gonna move on. I would suggest putting all your Go code, or at least this basic intro playground type stuff, just put it in a folder. I'm calling it Golang getting started. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter. As with most programming languages, typically, like ideally, the folder structure doesn't matter. It's the code itself that does. Cool. So when that is done, and I guess you technically didn't even have to do that first. The big thing here is getting your IDE to do the most it can for you in terms of Go. So I would go to the extensions, and you're gonna want to look for the Golang extension that's from the Google team. In this case, I've already had it installed. If you didn't have it installed, you'd see just an install button. I see a disable and uninstall button. Feel free, like I again highly recommend installing it. You don't have to. The other thing that if you do choose to install is, let's just close this. You're gonna run. Hopefully the UIs are the same in Linux and Windows, like as it is in Mac. I'm assuming that whatever command I have here on top is what you're gonna have. In general, if you don't, then it's gonna like you can just replace this symbol, this command symbol, with a control. So Control Shift P, Command Shift P should open up this this window, and you're gonna type go install update tools. I already did this, so that's why you see it come up as recently used. You might not see that, but you'll want to have go install update tools. And then I just suggest clicking on all these modules, and that's what they are. They're modules. These are GitHub repositories that you can actually go and check out yourself if you're curious about what they do, what they are. Like you can inspect them if you want. Check out the source code. It's all up to you. They have little blurbs here of what each module does in VS Code. I say just grab them all, because why not? Again, and if you don't need them, you can turn them off. Like you can go through the process of turning them off. So while this is happening, it's not required for me to wait for this to finish. The really important one was probably Go packages, which like auto complete slash like it will put automatic import statements for you. Like if you're an IntelliJ, type a class name, and then you can hit like some key like there's some key combination you can hit on your keyboard, and it'll automatically put in like the hash map class or whatever it is that you're doing. It's similar. So in the folder that you're working in, so again, I went from extensions to the Explorer here, right? In the folder that you're working in, you're going to want to add a file. You can call this file whatever you want. The big idea here is that it needs to have a Go extension. So I'm gonna just call it foo.go. You could call it main.go. You could call it whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Ooh, actually, before I continue, the other thing is you might have noticed like I have this little icon. I don't know if you'll have that in VS Code by default. This is super specific to VS Code, but you may also want to get icons. I can't remember what I installed. There you go, VS Code icons. This is pretty cool. A lot of people use this. I recommend it. It's cool. It gives icons to pretty much everything. It even gives icons to like folders and stuff. So it's just like a style thing. It's totally not doesn't make your IDE more functional, or maybe it does, but the code won't change. The file extension won't change. But now I can see like, oh, this is a Go file. I have this nice little Go logo here, or this Go symbol for a Go file. When you choose your file name and put .go at the end of it, you're going to need to say package main. I'll explain what that means in a second and like why we need that, because whenever you're doing a new programming language, you should probably ask like, okay, why do we need that? Is it just a rule of the language? If it is, you're just going to have to embed it like, in your head. You're going to have to say like, okay, I accept that I need package main whenever I'm writing a Go program. That's not always true, but you'll see what I'm talking about in a sec. You're going to need a main function. If you're coming from another language like C++, Java, C, other languages have some kind of remnants of main since they were probably written in C. So to some extent, like the interpreter or the compiler, something about it was written in C. There's probably a main function involved. You need a main function. In this main function, we're just going to do something simple like all the other programming tutorials since we're just getting set up here. We're going to use the format library. That's this, not library, package. We're using the format package. And we're going to say we want to print something. Just like in all the other things, like most languages have a print functionality in them, right? So when I want to print something, that's like me saying, oh, put this, make this like an output. Like, let me see this somewhere, right? In this case, we're going to print to the terminal. So println, that's the one that will print for you and then give a new line. This is what's cool about having an IDE, in my opinion. You wouldn't get this if you were doing this in Vim. I don't think there's a way to do that. I don't know if there's like a plugin to do that. There's no way there. I don't. If there is, like somebody would have to point it to me because I don't. I've never looked for that too. I could look for it. I'll find out. An IDE will tell you like, hey, here's the function. So here's the signature. That is like, what are the inputs? What are the outputs? What's the name? Where does it live? So it lives in the format package. Name of it is println. These are the inputs. I know this looks really intimidating. Like especially if you're seeing this for the first time, it doesn't matter. The big point is that this really means anything. You can put anything here. It doesn't matter. And we'll talk about outputs, later and like what exactly is going on here. We'll talk about all that later. But the point is like your IDE will show you this. It'll show you a description. The other thing your IDE can do if you're in VS Code, at least I know Golang should do this if it's anything like IntelliJ, because IntelliJ does this, but you can actually click into the function and go and see the implementation. And in this case, VS Code will actually show you like, oh, println actually just calls this other function, which calls these functions. And you can keep going. There's no end here, which is pretty cool. So in this case, what I'm going to do is, like I said, this function really takes anything, and their Golang does have strings, just like most other languages. I'm just going to say hello world. So pretty straightforward. That's it. There's nothing else to really say about this. Now what I'm going to do is go back to my terminal. So again, if you're not working in an IDE, you don't have to be. You can, wherever you wrote this program, you can say something along the lines of go run, sorry, not main, food.go, or you could even say something like all the files that end with go. And the Go program will compile it. It'll do all the checking that it needs to do to make sure it's a valid file, compile, and then it'll actually go and execute it for you in this way. So that's one new thing you could do if you have an IDE. There's in VS Code specifically, there's this run button up here. You can hit run, and sometimes this comes out and works for me. Sometimes it doesn't. I feel like it depends. Maybe it's like a configuration that I need to run. But I should just be like, okay, I should be able to say run. Yeah, I don't know why. I'm not seeing anything here for some reason. Oh, see, that's weird. Like, I don't know exactly what was happening there. I was running it. As you can see, I run it the same number of times that I clicked the button, but that's weird. So in here, assuming it's not all weird for you like it was for me just now, you can run this, and you should be good. And it'll even give you a little bit of some metrics like exit code and the time it took to run this. Cool. So that is the basics of writing a Golang program. Now, I said I was gonna talk a little bit about this package main thing at a high level, like some of the requirements of this program. So this is the program, right? All programs live within packages, right? Like programs are comprised of packages. When you want to execute Golang code, that code needs to live and it needs to start executing from the main function. That main function needs to live within the main package. So what does that mean here? This is the code we want to execute. This is me saying I want to print hello world to the screen, to the terminal. And actually, let me make this a little bit bigger. Ooh, too big. I think that should be good. Hopefully that's not too big a deal. This is me saying I want to print hello world to the terminal. That's whatever, however Go does it, that's what I want to happen. Just Golang should just get it done, right? Now, this right here will only be executed if it's coming from the main function. In this case, it's in the main function. This code right here is sitting inside the main function. The main function is me telling Golang start here and then move down. So it'll execute this step will be executed first, right? This will be step 1. I could do another print statement and another one, and this will be step 2 and step 3, right? And it doesn't have to be the same thing every single time. It could be something like maybe a smiley face, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is that Golang will set things up in a way that your computer will say, okay, this is the main function. I'm going to start executing this instruction. Then I'll go here. I'll execute this. I'll execute this. Then I'll come and execute this. This function right here, it's a rule of Golang that it needs to sit inside the main package. So let me show you what happens when it doesn't. So let's say that somebody came along and said, "Oh, why didn't you just name it foo? You're in the foo file, and after all." That's fair. That's like a reasonable thing to say if you've never, actually worked with Go before. So I could say go run foo.go just like I did before. I get an error, and it's like, "Hey, you're trying to run code in this file. You're trying to me telling it to run means like execute. That's me saying like, oh, execute the code that's in here, right? There is a main function, which is fine. There isn't a main. There is no main package here though. That's because Go can only run code that's in the main package. It's not going to run code that's in any other package. And there are other packages, like we just saw. There's the format package. So that means if I had this file, right? If I actually had this file stored locally, I couldn't say like go run anything in this file like this. Let me see. Oh well, here. It'd be easier for me to just say just go here. So none of the stuff in here. I can't execute anything in here. There actually shouldn't be a main function in here. And as you can see, if I command F or Control F, you won't find one because none of the code in here can be executed. If I try to go run print.go, like which is what this is, go run print.go, this file, it'll say, hey, this isn't in the main package. What do you want me to do? So the rule is that any code that's going to be run by your computer and that's going to be compiled by Go, any code that's going to be executed needs to be in the main package. It doesn't matter what the file name is. Package main needs to be at the top of the file. That's the rule. The other thing, let's say if I called this function foo. Well, that's reasonable too. The name of the file is foo. Why not just call the function foo? This is what if I wanted to name this show me like Facebook.go. Maybe there's a Facebook function in here that will, I don't know, go and talk to Facebook about, I don't know, something. But the idea here is this is reasonable. This is not like a crazy thing where hey, I named this function foo because it's in the foo file. The issue there is that Go will complain. And it'll tell you something that looks a little different. It's going to say hey, look, you don't have a main function. I don't know what to run. It's in the main package, great, that's fine. So I can run whatever's in this file, but I can't because there's no main function. So another rule of Golang is that you will need to specify a main function to execute your code. This is what tells Golang, hey, start here. This is what tells the Go compiler, I need you to start here. The computer will say, okay, I'm going to start at main. I'm going to execute this. Then I execute this. Then I execute this, right? So that's some of the basics and getting a little bit more into the details of the rules around Go. So you can do other stuff too. You can add, subtract, multiply, divide. You could do math in Go. You can communicate over the network to other computers with Go. You can read and write files with Go. You're going to see there's a lot of stuff you can do with Go. This is like a systems programming language. So it's going to feel somewhat like C if you ever programmed in it. It's going to feel a little bit like those low-level languages because it gives you a lot of the functionalities to do that. So we'll talk more about that in other videos how to make packages, how to use variables, different types of variables, how to define your own types. We're going to realize that Go doesn't have any classes in it, but there are things like interfaces. So we'll talk about all that in videos that are later down the line.